Hey guys, this video is just going to be a quick review of the TOUCHNEW sketch markers. I'm not a professional when it comes to using markers, and this is of course just my opinion. So, I got these on amazon.co.uk because I'm in the UK, I'm sure you can get them from other places. And these are the TOUCHNEW markers. So these, like many other markers, are alcohol based so that you can blend with them. So obviously we've got the 168 different coloured markers. We've got the case that they came in, which is pretty cool, although the TOUCHNEW text on the front is rubbing off a little bit, not a big deal. And we also got 2 white fine liners, 2 black fine liners, and 2 black felt tips. And we'll take a look at these shortly. And I didn't realise that any of those actually came in the order, so I'm just seeing those as free extras really. So this cost me £69.99, which is an absolute bargain. These are so cheap in comparison with other markers that I actually wasn't even expecting a lot of them to turn up, or I thought a lot of them wouldn't work. And that brings me to my first point. After testing each colour, there was 3 of them where the colour seemed to only come out of the chisel nib and not out of the bullet tip nib. It seemed almost a little bit dry. Now I have been told you can use a bit of alcohol to rejuvenate those, but it wasn't a problem anyway because I emailed the company through Amazon and they just sent them straight out in the mail. And the other smaller thing I had a bit of an issue with was one of the fine liners. I'm not sure how well you can see on there, but it doesn't have a nib on it. So I couldn't use this one. Not a big deal, to be honest, because I wasn't expecting these anyway. So you can see this one actually does have a nib. So I still got one that worked. But yeah, for such a cheap price, I honestly expected a few to be missing or even more than that to not be working. So I'm genuinely really pleased with that, especially seeing as they replaced the ones quite quickly that were having problems. One of the first things that I did notice is that some of the text on the top has worn off on some colours. It is a bit annoying. I can see it on a few others as well. It's still on the other side, and it's not much of a deal breaker, but you will want to create a swatch, and long term it might be annoying if a lot of them have it. So let's take a quick look at the colour swatch. So some of these do not match up too well with the lids. Some of them are not bad actually, but I would always advise creating one of these as soon as you get your markers. Keep this and use it pretty much any time you're starting a marker piece with these pens. I'm not sure how well you can see it on camera, but these fluorescent colours here, like highlighter type ones, they came out a little bit weird for me, and I will go into that in a second. But the others seem to come out really nicely. And I do like the large range of greys that you get with these. When marking these down, I was trying to get all these in the right order, but you might actually notice I think there's 2 that are in the wrong place. So leave a comment below and let me know if you do notice the ones that are in the wrong order. I think you've got a really nice range of colours here, from some sort of paler pastel tones to some vibrant rich tones. You can see some of them as well are a fairly similar colour. I wouldn't say there's any that are quite exactly the same, although some of them really are close. You're bound to get a little bit of overlap when you've got 168. Right, so let's take a look at the nibs that come on these markers. Okay, so we've got a fine bullet tip, and then we've got a broad tip or a chisel tip. So this is quite like a lot of other markers really, and I just wanted to give you a comparison as to how these look compared to Copic sketch markers. Obviously these are reversed, so that annoys me that the text is upside down, but it's the closest comparison. However, as a lot of you already know, Copic sketch markers come with a brush tip, which is great for blending and is one of the reasons that they are so popular. So I also have a Copic original, I think they're called. And I'm showing this just so you can see it's a more similar nib on both ends compared to the sketch. Size-wise, they are all pretty similar with the lids off, although Copic originals are quite a lot thicker and squarer. Squarer? Is that a word? More cuboid? They're bigger. The markers are bigger. Whilst we've got them out, let's just compare. Size-wise, they're all very similar. The original's a little bit shorter. Short and fat. But the TOUCHNEW and the sketch are very similar in size. And whilst we've got that there, let's just compare it quickly to a Copic ciao marker. Again, similar size, but obviously this is a thinner barrel. Although Copic sketch markers are always going to be the top of the range, I actually think I prefer the look of them. Although they're almost identical, I prefer it with a white barrel than the grey barrel. Personal preference though. We will take a quick look at price comparison at the end as well. Spoiler, TOUCHNEW is cheaper in case you couldn't guess. One quick thing to note with the greys in the TOUCHNEW markers are that the cool greys and the green greys look very similar first glance in terms of the text on them. So just be careful that you don't accidentally pick the wrong marker, which I have done several times already. So we are going to have a quick look at blendability. So we've got Copic markers C9 and C7 and TOUCHNEW markers C9 and C7, or CG9 and CG7 I should say. I'm going to use the chisel nib in this example so that it's a fair test, because if I use the brush on Copic markers and then the bullet nib on these, it's using a different nib, obviously. And I'm just going in with a C7 with the Copic markers, trying to put this down quite thick. Oh, I should have put paper under this. Oh, too late now. And then I'm going to go in with a C9, straight back in with my C7. So it's only a subtle blend anyway because they're fairly similar in colour, but it blends pretty well, so we'll try that quickly with the TOUCHNEW. But not before I put some paper under. This is Bristol board, by the way, so it shouldn't go through very easily. So again, let's start with the 7. I keep changing from saying Copic and Copic. Okay, so these are actually quite similar, better than I was expecting. I think the Copic markers have blended in a little bit better, because I am starting to see some marks with the TOUCHNEW, but it's really not bad at all. And even the actual tones are very similar. One thing, I'm not sure if you noticed this on camera, the TOUCHNEW to me looked like there was more ink coming out quite quickly. But overall, that's pretty good. Although I think what I'm going to have to do is try some colours that are not quite as close, so the blending is going to be more difficult. So this time I'm going to use Cool Grey 3 to Cool Grey 7. Quite a big jump, you probably wouldn't do it realistically, but we'll see what shows up. I'm afraid I'm having to stick with greys for this test because I only have greys in the Copic sketch. Would help if I was actually in shot. Start with a Cool Grey 3 in Copic. So this one is not working so well. The jump must have been a little bit too big, or my blending technique must not quite be good enough. Again, remember I am using the chisel tips for this. It's probably just too big a jump between the two shades, but that's fine. There is still a bit of blending there. So I'm expecting something similar with these. I have accidentally started with a darker one this time instead of the lighter one. Not that it makes a difference. Again, I can tell the ink is coming out faster, but that might be an advantage for blending. Whoa, look at all that. Yeah, so as you expect, it hasn't blended very well. I wouldn't say it's done any worse than Copic though. I would say, if anything, it's maybe a little bit better. It's given a slightly different effect, so I guess it depends which you prefer. I'd say the TOUCHNEW one is a bit cleaner. But as you saw on camera, there seemed to be a lot of ink coming out quite quickly, which would normally help it blend quite well. So I wouldn't really say either of the markers blends too good when the colours are quite far away, or when the shades are quite far away. And we already know that the 7 and the 9 blend quite well. So this is a TOUCHNEW markers, and this time I am trying the nibs. Sorry, I'm trying the bullet nib is what I meant to say. Now, there are different ways of doing this, and I'm sure someone will tell me that I'm doing it wrong and that I should be using a circular motion. But I'm trying it in strips first. Actually, to be fair, that's blended pretty well. So I've dropped it down to a 6 now, and I'm going to use a circular motion instead. To be honest, this 6 does look quite similar to the 7 anyway. It's only a small area, and it is a similar shade, even though I've dropped it down another one. But it's actually blended surprisingly well. TOUCHNEW, feather effect, TOUCHNEW, circular effect, or 2 snowmen, apparently. Both of these were pretty successful. Whilst we're on a roll, I'm going to use 44 to 45 as well, just so we can get some colour in there. So it has blended, but it's also separated it a little bit, maybe starting to bring the page up a little bit. I put on more ink than I would normally. I can also feel underneath that it is actually starting to indent the page a little bit, so it's raised on this side. But I did use a lot of ink. So one other thing we said we would look at quickly is the pens that came free. I actually wrote these in this pen, so I know this one works. Quite nice black ink, what you would expect from a fine liner. I'm going to go ahead and assume these are not marker proof, but I will test that in a second. Pen that I'm classing as more as a felt tip, probably not quite a brush pen. Nice ink, writes well. The white pen, so this is more like a gel pen from the looks of things. Let's go over this bit. Okay, at first I was going to say not bad, but as it's setting, it's starting to get a little bit more transparent. And it's not giving a very even coverage either. I can feel it being scratchy and covering some areas more than others. So with our colourless blender, I'm going to really quickly go over these to see if they are marker proof. Okay, so I'm actually pretty surprised by this. They're not completely marker proof, I wouldn't say, although I didn't give them that long to actually dry. There is a bit of smudging, especially with the fine liner, but it's not as bad as I was expecting. And this pen also, an awful lot less smudging than I was expecting, so I'm quite impressed with that. So fine liner, pretty good. Felt tip, the ink isn't quite as black as the fine liner, but it seems pretty good. The white gel pen, on the other hand, sucks. As you can see from that, the white gel pen pretty much seems to have gone nearly. So one other quick thing that we want to look at, I just want to show you what happens with the fluorescents. They are usable, but you seem to get this sort of scratchy line effect from them, and they're not going dry, so I don't really know why they do that. You can feel when you're using them that it's not coming out anywhere near as strong or as smooth. Does that make sense? It almost feels like it doesn't have a flat edge, so you're struggling to press the full side of it down, and you're left with these scratchy effects. To be honest, it kind of seems like a different ink within these, so I'm actually going to test them to see if they're even blendable. It seems like it sits on top of the page instead of actually soaking into it. You guys won't be able to tell on camera, but this feels like it has set, and it feels like I'm moving it. I can actually physically feel a raised area where it's set on it, and I'm not sure how well you can see it, but this is actually bringing the page up a little bit. Luckily, that's only like, 6 pens. So I wouldn't buy these if you're buying it specifically for the fluorescence. Ooh, sticky. Okay, so these are a bit sticky. This one isn't setting very well. So for me, the fluorescent markers are crap. Okay, so I am just using the markers now to try out a more finished piece. And the paper I'm using is the Strathmore Bristol Board Vellum. So as already mentioned, I paid $69.99 for 168 markers. That works out at 42 pence per marker, which really is good. So Copic are obviously sort of industry standard, so I'll use them as a price comparison. So just taking a quick look online now, Copic sketch markers seem to be on for roughly £5.20 to £5.50 at the moment. The classic markers seem to be anywhere from £5.40 upwards, and the Copic ciao seem to be anywhere from £2.95 to £3.20. That is obviously going to vary depending on if you buy the markers individually or if you buy them as part of a set. If you shop around, you might be able to find them a bit cheaper than that, but they seem to be the average prices at the moment. So compared to the Copic sketch marker, the TOUCHNEW markers actually work out roughly 13 times cheaper. So that means for every one Copic sketch marker, you would have 13 TOUCHNEW markers. So there really is a big difference. Unfortunately, it doesn't look at the moment like you can actually buy TOUCHNEW markers individually. And you have to bear in mind, I did buy the biggest set, which works out cheapest per marker. If you buy some of the smaller sets of TOUCHNEW markers, it is going to work out a little bit more expensive. So I'm just going to quickly list prices of the sets that are available on Amazon at the moment. So you can get 36 colours for $17.99, 48 colours for $22.99, 60 colours for $26.99, 80 colours for $34.99. They also have 24 in a skin tone set available for $19.99, 30 grey tone set, $16.99, 20 ocean blue sky set, $13.99. Personally, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use these for finished pieces. I was really happy with the way this turned out, especially considering I'm not that good with markers. So they're great for finished pieces, but they're also going to be great for sketching because you're going to feel a lot less guilty about using the ink when you've only paid this much. So I'm showing a picture on the screen now just of the finished piece with only markers, just so you can see what you can achieve with just TOUCHNEW markers. And I'm going to carry on going with that in the background. I'm just going to add some pencil colour to it just to give it some finishing touches. But obviously that doesn't really reflect the marker review. So I'm just going to finish with some pros and cons, and I'll give it a final score. So a few quick pros. Number one is obviously the price because they are really cheap. They have lots of colours. Depending which set you buy, it comes with a few extra pens and a carry case. The design, in my opinion, looks really nice. And maybe most importantly, the blending seems to be just as good as other brands that I've used using the same kind of nibs. The lids are easy to pull off and put back on. Sounds silly, but that really does annoy me with certain other brands. So if we move on to cons, they are not refillable. They cannot be purchased individually, so you will have to buy them as part of a set. This one is down to opinion, but it's a pretty big one for most people. There is no brush nib. You usually have to wait a couple of weeks for the shipping with these. The highlights or the fluorescent colours are not very good in terms of alcohol markers. There's a chance that some of the text or the names of the colours will have worn off on the lids. And not all of the colours on the lids perfectly match the colour that actually comes out. But to be honest, I find that to be the case with any other brand as well. Okay, so after all that, I think I would give them an 8 out of 10. But admittedly, I don't have too much experience with them just yet. So I'm going to keep using these, and if I find my opinion changes on any of these things, I'll maybe write in the description box below or create a new video in the future. I hope you guys found this useful. If you have any comments or if there's anything I've missed, just post them below and I will try my best to get back to you. Please do like and share the video, and be sure to subscribe for more content. Thanks so much for watching.